happens to a Dark Lord when his greatest weapon and the source of his power is destroyed? This is the haunting question we'll explore today. Fans of Middle-earth, welcome back. Let's dive into one of the most pivotal moments in Tolkien's legendarium, the defeat of Sauron after the destruction of the One Ring. When Frodo and Sam reached the fiery depths of Mount Doom, the fate of Middle-earth teetered on the edge of a knife. The ring, the linchpin of Sauron's might, was unmade in the fire that had birthed it. But the destruction of the ring wasn't just the end of a physical object. It was the unmaking of Sauron himself. Bound to the ring in both spirit and strength, its loss meant that Sauron's very essence was shattered. Tolkien described Sauron's state after the ring's destruction as a fate worse than death. Unlike mortals who fade into the unknown, Sauron, as a MEA, could not simply vanish. His spirit remained, stripped of all form, power, and the ability to dominate as he once had. Tolkien writes in the Silmarillion that such fallen spirits are unable to flee the world and are left to wander it as shadows of Malice. Imagine a being that once sought to rule all of Middle-earth, now reduced to a powerless wraith, fully conscious of its failure. Sauron's torment wasn't just the loss of power. It was the awareness of freedom flourishing in the lands he had sought to enslave. Middle-earth would recover, but he would never rise again. He became a silent, bitter presence, an eternal prisoner within a world he could no longer touch. The destruction of the One Ring wasn't just a defeat, it was a reckoning. Sauron had poured so much of himself into the ring that its end ensured his own collapse. This wasn't just about losing control over his armies or his stronghold of Bador. It was about the breaking of his will and the undoing of his very identity. In the letters of J.R.R. Tolkien, the author reflects that Sauron was reduced to a mere memory of malicious will. He couldn't rally his forces, couldn't inspire fear, couldn't even take a form that could be perceived. All he had left was his malice, goring away at him, as powerless as it was eternal. What made Sauron's defeat so significant was the finality of it. This wasn't the kind of fall where a villain might regroup, bide their time, and rise again. With the One Ring gone, every thread of power he'd woven into Middle-earth unraveled. His massive armies, held together by fear and his dominating will, fell into disarray. Orcs, trolls, and men corrupted by his influence scattered in chaos like leaves in a storm, their connection to their dark master severed. Bador, the fortress that had loomed over Mordor as a symbol of his might, crumbled into ruin. Tolkien describes its fall as though the land itself rebelled against the weight of his evil. The earth swallowed it whole, shaking free from centuries of oppression. This wasn't just a military defeat, it was a liberation. The very landscape of Middle-earth seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. For Sauron, however, this defeat wasn't just about losing his physical dominion. The torment lay in the fact that he was still aware. He could see the world healing, the free peoples uniting, and the shadow he had cast lifting. But he could do nothing about it. Stripped of his ability to influence or even be seen, he was cursed to exist as a silent witness to the freedom and hope he had tried so hard to extinguish. Tolkien's portrayal of Sauron's fate is haunting because it's not just about punishment, it's about consequence. Sauron poured everything he was into the One Ring, binding his power and identity to it. By doing so, he ensured his own destruction when it was unmade. In the end, his ambition became his undoing, leaving him with nothing but a lingering shadow of malice, forever trapped in the world he sought to dominate. Continuing with the next premise, the nature of Sauron's spirit. Sauron's defeat at the end of the Third Age wasn't the end of his existence, but it was a transformation into something far more tragic. As a MEA, Sauron was a being of incredible longevity, bound to the world of Ardor itself. Unlike mortals who pass beyond the circles of the world upon death, his spirit remained tethered to Middle-earth. This connection was both a testament to his inherent power and a reflection of the choices that had led to his downfall. In the Silmarillion, Tolkien describes the fate of fallen Maiar as beings unable to leave the world they sought to corrupt. Sauron's spirit, once filled with ambition and cunning, was reduced to a powerless wraith. He couldn't take physical form again, nor could he wield influence over the lands he had once ruled. Instead, he became a shadow, invisible to the free peoples, lingering in the corners of Middle-earth like a bitter memory. What makes Sauron's fate so uniquely torturous is his awareness. He wasn't a mindless shade wandering without purpose. He retained the consciousness of who he had been, along with the unbearable knowledge of his failure. Middle-earth's recovery after his defeat must have been agonizing for him to witness, a constant reminder of the freedom he despised and the unity he had worked tirelessly to destroy. This existence as a powerless shadow wasn't just punishment for his deeds. It was a direct result of his nature and choices. In creating the One Ring, Sauron poured so much of his essence into it that when it was destroyed, it took him with it. Tolkien emphasizes this in his letters, noting that the destruction of the ring didn't annihilate Sauron outright, but left him as a mere spirit of malice, unable to assume a form. Tolkien also contrasts Sauron's fate with that of his former master, Morgoth. While Morgoth was cast into the void, separated entirely from the world, Sauron's spirit remained bound to the very land he sought to dominate. This tethering was a cruel irony. Sauron, who had sought total control, now existed in a state of complete impotence, forced to observe the world he could no longer touch or influence. Before he became the Dark Lord of Mordor, Sauron was known by another name, Mion. As one of the Mir, powerful spirits created by Eru Ilúvatar, Mion was a being of incredible skill and intellect. He served under Al, the smith, one of the Vala who was renowned for his craftsmanship and love of creation. Myron excelled in forging and order, striving for perfection in everything he did. However, it was this very desire for control and perfection that would ultimately lead him down a darker path. Merrin's fall began when he encountered Morgoth, the first Dark Lord and the most powerful of the Valar. Morgoth's rebellion against Eru Ilúvatar and the other Vala was rooted in his desire to impose his will upon creation, reshaping it to reflect his own vision. For Myron, Morgoth's offer of order and control was irresistible. He believed that under Morgoth's rule, the chaos of the world could be subdued, and his vision of perfection could be realized. But Morgoth's order was not one of creation. It was domination. Under Morgoth's influence, Myron's ideals became twisted. He abandoned the principles of AA and embraced Morgoth's vision of power through fear and corruption. It was during this time that Myron shed his former name and became known as Sauron, a title that would echo throughout the ages as a symbol of dread and tyranny. Unlike Morgoth, who ruled through brute force and terror, Sauron preferred subtler methods. He learned to manipulate and deceive, understanding that true control came from winning the hearts and minds of his victims. In the Silmarillion, Tolkien writes that Sauron mastered the art of seduction and false promises, offering gifts and knowledge that ultimately bound those who accepted them to his will. This cunning approach would later define his strategy for domination in the Second and Third Ages. Even after Morgoth's defeat and banishment at the end of the First Age, Sauron's ambition did not waver. Freed from his master's shadow, he began to carve his own path. Assuming a fair and wise guise, Sauron presented himself as a benefactor to the peoples of Middle-earth. He became known as Anatar, the Lord of Gifts, and it was under this persona that he approached the elves and laid the foundation for his greatest creation, the Rings of Power. Sauron's rise to power cannot be fully understood without examining the profound influence of Morgoth, his master and the original Dark Lord. Morgoth, once known as Melkor, was the mightiest of the Vala, created with powers surpassing those of his peers. But his immense potential became a curse, consumed by envy and a desire to dominate. Morgoth sought to corrupt and control all of Aa, the created universe. He turned against the other Valar, waging war on the world and bending countless beings to his will. Among those he ensnared was Sauron. For Sauron, Morgoth was more than just a master. He was an archetype of ambition. Morgoth taught Sauron the value of fear and the power of corruption. From him, Sauron learned how to twist the hearts of others, using their desires and fears against them. Where Morgoth wielded brute force to destroy and conquer, Sauron adopted a more insidious approach, preferring manipulation and deceit. He saw that domination was more lasting when it came from within, rather than being imposed by force. This distinction between Morgoth and Sauron is crucial. Morgoth was the embodiment of chaos and destruction, seeking to undo the creation of the Valar and spread his darkness across Middle-earth. Sauron, on the other hand, sought order, but an order that served him alone. While Morgoth sought to break the world, Sauron sought to mold it, turning its free peoples into instruments of his will. It was this divergence that made Sauron a unique and dangerous adversary, capable of infiltrating the very fabric of Middle-earth societies. Despite his cunning, Sauron could not escape the shadow of Morgoth's legacy. The lessons he learned from his master shaped his ambitions and ultimately his downfall. Morgoth's influence is seen most clearly in Sauron's relentless pursuit of the One Ring. Like Morgoth's creation of the Silmarils, the One Ring became a symbol of power and corruption, binding its creator to its fate. Sauron's efforts to dominate Middle-earth mirrored Morgoth's attempts to control all of AA, but they also carried the same seeds of failure. Tolkien often draws parallels between the two Dark Lords, emphasizing the cyclical nature of corruption in his legendarium. Both sought to dominate. Both created objects of immense power that ultimately led to their undoing, and both were reduced to powerless, formless beings. Morgoth's banishment to the void and Sauron's exile as a shadow in Middle-earth serve as stark reminders of the consequences of unchecked ambition and the relentless pursuit of power. Sauron's greatest act of deception and domination was the creation of the One Ring. After centuries of careful planning and manipulation, he forged the ring in the fires of Aod ruin, pouring a significant part of his own essence into it. The One Ring was no mere tool. It was the cornerstone of his power, designed to bind the other rings of power and their bearers to his will. Through the ring, Sauron sought to achieve what even Morgoth had failed to do: absolute control over Middle-earth. The story of the rings begins with Sauron's guise as Annatar, the Lord of Gifts. In this fair and benevolent form, he approached the elves of Eregion, led by Kel Bamor, a master craftsman descended from the line of Feanor. Sauron offered them knowledge and guidance, teaching them the art of forging rings that could preserve beauty, resist decay, and enhance the natural world. The elves, trusting Annatar's wisdom, crafted the 3 rings for themselves, rings of preservation untainted by Sauron's direct touch. But Sauron's true goal was to dominate, not to create. In secret, he forged the One Ring, embedding it with the power to control the other rings of power. As Tolkien describes in the Silmarillion, this act was a betrayal. By placing so much of himself into the One Ring, Sauron created an artifact that extended his influence across Middle-earth. It gave him a near omnipresent reach, allowing him to manipulate and dominate the wills of the bearers of the other rings. Yet, in binding himself to the One Ring, Sauron also created a profound vulnerability. His power, his very essence, was tied to its existence. As long as the ring endured, Sauron could rebuild even after great defeats. But if the ring were destroyed, it would unravel his strength and reduce him to a mere shadow of his former self. It was a calculated risk born of arrogance and the belief that no one would dare or be able to destroy it. This connection between Sauron and the ring defines his role in the legendarium. Unlike Morgoth, whose power was inherent and spread across the world, Sauron's power was concentrated and fragile. The One Ring was both his greatest strength and his fatal flaw. When Isildur cut the ring from Sauron's hand during the War of the Last Alliance, it didn't just weaken him, it initiated his long decline, leaving him as a disembodied presence, desperately searching for his lost treasure. The final moments of the One Ring's existence were as dramatic as they were unexpected. After years of peril and sacrifice, Frodo Baggins, the unlikeliest of heroes, stood on the brink of the Crack of Doom, where the ring had been forged. It was the culmination of a journey that tested the resolve and endurance of the Fellowship, and the fate of all Middle-earth rested on this single act: the destruction of the One Ring. But as Frodo approached the fiery chasm, something shifted. The ring, which had weighed so heavily on him throughout the journey, claimed him at the last moment. "I have come," Frodo declared, refusing to destroy the ring, and instead slipping it onto his finger. It was a chilling testament to the corruptive power of the ring, which even the most resilient could not resist. In that instant, Frodo ceased to be its bearer and became its servant. a temporary vessel for Sauron's will. The turning point came not from Frodo's strength, but from an unexpected intervention. Gollum. Driven by a twisted, obsessive love for the ring, Gollum attacked Frodo, biting off his finger to reclaim his precious. In his triumph, Gollum's clumsiness became the salvation of Middle-earth. As he danced with the ring in hand, he lost his balance and fell into the fiery abyss. The ring was consumed by the flames, and with it, the essence of Sauron was undone. Tolkien captures the gravity of this moment in The Return of the King. The destruction of the One Ring was not just the end of a physical object, but the breaking of a profound spiritual and magical bond. Sauron had poured so much of his power into the ring that its destruction unraveled his very being. At that moment, the great eye faltered and fell, and the shadow of Mordor began to dissipate. The simplicity of the act, the fall of Gollum, contrasted with the immense consequences. Barad-dûr crumbled, its dark walls collapsing as the power sustaining them vanished. The armies of orcs, trolls, and men corrupted by Sauron's influence scattered in confusion and fear. For the first time in centuries, Middle-earth was free from Sauron's grasp. The moment also highlighted an underlying theme in Tolkien's work: the unpredictability of fate. Frodo, the chosen ring-bearer, could not complete his task, but the seemingly insignificant and wretched figure of Gollum inadvertently saved Middle-earth. It was a reminder that even the smallest and most broken individuals can play a pivotal role in the grand tapestry of history. The destruction of the One Ring was not just a spiritual defeat for Sauron. It was a catastrophic unraveling of the vast empire he had built over centuries. His power, poured so deeply into the ring, was the binding force behind his armies and strongholds. When the ring was consumed by the fires of Mount Doom, that force shattered, and the effects rippled across Middle-earth like a breaking wave. Sauron's armies, orcs, trolls, and men corrupted by his influence, were held together by fear and the oppressive will of their master. Without the dark presence of Sauron to compel them, they descended into chaos. At the gates of Mordor, where the forces of Gondor and Rohan had been locked in desperate combat against overwhelming odds, the change was immediate. The once cohesive armies of Mordor broke apart, scattering in disarray. Orcs turned on each other, fleeing into the wilderness as their morale collapsed entirely. Tolkien's description of this moment in The Return of the King captures the magnitude of the shift. Barad-dûr, the dark tower which had stood as the ultimate symbol of Sauron's might, began to crumble. The black stone walls, sustained by his power, buckled and fell, collapsing into ruins. The earth itself seemed to rebel against the fortress, swallowing its remains as if erasing Sauron's presence from the land. The very landscape of Mordor, long scarred by his dominion, began to tremble and crack as though it too was liberated from his tyranny. For the free peoples of Middle-earth, this was not just a military victory, but a moment of profound relief. The shadow that had loomed over the lands for so long was lifting. Yet Tolkien does not portray this as a triumphant celebration. Instead, there is a sense of solemnity and bittersweet reflection. So much had been lost in the struggle: lives, lands, and hope. The destruction of Sauron was a victory, but it came at a great cost, reminding readers that even in victory, there are scars that remain. The collapse of Sauron's forces also symbolized the fragility of evil when it is rooted in domination and fear. Unlike the free peoples of Middle-earth, who fought for each other and for the hope of a better future, Sauron's armies had no loyalty beyond their master's commands. When those commands fell silent, so too did their will to fight. This stark contrast highlighted one of Tolkien's recurring themes: the resilience of free will and unity against the brittle structure of tyranny. While Morgoth was cast into the void beyond the confines of time and space, Sauron's fate was uniquely tied to Middle-earth itself. After the destruction of the One Ring, his spirit was left bound to the very land he had sought to dominate. This eternal exile wasn't just a punishment, it was a cruel irony. Sauron, who had once sought to bend all of Middle-earth to his will, was now powerless within its borders, a mere shadow of Malice. In the Silmarillion, Tolkien explains that spirits like Sauron, once fallen, are unable to leave the world they sought to corrupt. Sauron's spirit lingered, not as a physical presence, but as an echo of the darkness he had created. Unlike Morgoth, whose banishment removed him entirely from Ardor, Sauron remained tied to the cycles of time, watching as Middle-earth began to heal and flourish in his absence. It was a torment that only deepened with his awareness. This existence was far from oblivion. Sauron retained his consciousness, a cruel twist that made his exile even more unbearable. He could perceive the freedom and prosperity of Middle-earth, the very things he had fought to suppress. The lands he had twisted with his malice began to recover, and the peoples he had enslaved found unity and strength in his defeat. Yet Sauron could do nothing but watch, his will rendered impotent, his ambitions shattered. Tolkien captures this sense of exile with an almost poetic cruelty in his letters. He describes Sauron's state as a mere spirit of malice, unable to assume a form. For a being whose existence had been defined by control and manipulation, this loss of agency was a fitting punishment. Sauron, who had once sought to reshape Middle-earth in his image, was now doomed to witness its beauty and resilience, a mirror of everything he had tried to destroy. This form of exile also serves as a reflection of Tolkien's larger themes about power and its consequences. Sauron's inability to transcend Middle-earth was a direct result of his own actions. By binding so much of himself to the One Ring and to the world, he ensured that he could never escape it. His imprisonment was self-made, a poignant reminder that the pursuit of domination often leads to isolation and futility. In Tolkien's Legendarium, the downfall of Sauron is not merely a tale of victory over evil. It is a demonstration of moral and cosmic justice. Middle-earth operates within a framework where actions, especially those rooted in corruption and malice, carry inevitable consequences. Sauron's story exemplifies this, showing how the pursuit of absolute power leads not only to ruin, but to an existence defined by the very things one sought to escape. Sauron's punishment was not arbitrary. It was tied directly to his choices and the nature of his being. By investing his essence into the One Ring, he made himself inseparable from it. The ring became the embodiment of his will, his strength, and his identity. When it was destroyed, his power was not merely diminished, it was undone. This was a justice born of natural laws, where the pursuit of domination inherently carried the seeds of self-destruction. Tolkien's portrayal of Sauron's fate contrasts sharply with the ultimate reward for those who resist corruption. The free peoples of Middle-earth, who fought to preserve their autonomy and unity, are granted the chance to rebuild and thrive. In The Return of the King, the imagery of a world healing after Sauron's defeat is a testament to the resilience of goodness. The Shire is restored, Gondor prospers, and even the once barren lands of Mordor begin to show signs of recovery. This restoration underscores a cosmic balance where evil's downfall allows for renewal. The cyclical nature of corruption is also central to Tolkien's vision. Sauron's fate mirrors that of Morgoth, his master and the first Dark Lord. Both sought to reshape the world according to their will, and both were ultimately consumed by their ambition. Morgoth was cast into the void, an exile beyond time and space, while Sauron was condemned to remain in Middle-earth, powerless and irrelevant. These parallel fates reinforce the idea that the pursuit of unchecked power leads not to fulfillment, but to emptiness. For Tolkien, the moral consequences of Sauron's actions extend beyond his own fate. His downfall serves as a warning to others about the cost of abandoning one's purpose for the sake of domination. Sauron, who was once a Maia of Ali, turned away from his role as a servant of creation and became a destroyer. His punishment reflects not only the loss of his power, but also the loss of his identity and purpose, leaving him as nothing more than a shadow of Malice. Continuing with the next premise, themes of corruption and redemption. Sauron's story is deeply tied to Tolkien's exploration of corruption and the absence of redemption for those who fall too far. Originally a Maia of immense skill and devotion, Sauron's descent into darkness began with his lust for control and perfection. His corruption was gradual, a series of choices that moved him further from his original purpose as a servant of creation. By the time he became the Dark Lord of Mordor, he was entirely consumed by his ambition, incapable of seeking redemption. Unlike characters such as Frodo or Boromir, who grapple with the temptation of power but ultimately retain their humanity, Sauron fully embraced his darker instincts. He didn't merely wield the One Ring as a tool. He made it an extension of himself. This act of binding his essence to the ring symbolized his complete surrender to corruption. In Tolkien's letters, he emphasizes that such a choice left no room for repentance. Sauron had become a being defined by his malice and ambition, incapable of returning to the light. Tolkien contrasts Sauron's irredeemable nature with the struggles of other characters in The Lord of the Rings. Frodo, who carries the burden of the ring to Mount Doom, is profoundly affected by its influence, but retains his core goodness. Even Gollum, twisted and consumed by his obsession with the ring, has moments of regret and glimpses of his former self. Sauron, by comparison, shows no such conflict. His pursuit of power is unwavering, and his refusal to consider another path seals his fate. In Tolkien's world, redemption requires humility and the willingness to surrender control, qualities that Sauron lacked entirely. His inability to see beyond his own desires meant that he couldn't conceive of a reality where power wasn't the ultimate goal. This is what ultimately separates him from other fallen characters who find redemption, such as Saruman, who despite his failings still had opportunities to turn back before his death. The absence of redemption in Sauron's story is as much a tragedy as it is a warning. It demonstrates the destructive cycle of corruption, where each choice to embrace darkness makes it harder to return to the light. By the time of his defeat, Sauron's very nature was so intertwined with malice and domination that even his spirit was incapable of seeking anything else. His eternal exile as a powerless shadow reflects this, a fitting end for a being who abandoned creation in favor of control. The defeat of Sauron was not accomplished by any single hero or act, but through the unity and resilience of Middle-earth's free peoples. While the destruction of the One Ring marked the final blow, the efforts of countless individuals and nations were crucial in bringing about Sauron's downfall. Each played a unique role, showcasing the strength of cooperation and sacrifice in the face of overwhelming darkness. The Fellowship of the Ring embodied this unity, bringing together individuals from vastly different backgrounds: hobbits, men, an elf, a dwarf, and a wizard, all united by a common purpose: to resist Sauron. Their journey was a testament to the power of collaboration, where even the smallest and seemingly weakest among them, Frodo and Sam, were entrusted with the most critical task. As Gandalf noted, it was precisely because hobbits were unassuming and untainted by ambition that they were suited to carry the burden of the ring. Beyond the Fellowship, the nations of Gondor and Rohan played pivotal roles in the war against Sauron. Gondor, long the bulwark against Mordor, stood as the first line of defense against Sauron's armies. Rohan, led by Theoden and later Éomer, answered Gondor's call for aid, demonstrating the importance of alliances in the face of existential threats. The Battle of Pelennor Fields, where the armies of Rohan and Gondor clashed with Sauron's forces, was a turning point that kept hope alive even as the shadow of Mordor loomed. The elves and dwarves, too, contributed in their own ways. Though their involvement was less direct, their sacrifices and wisdom provided crucial support. Legolas and Gimli's companionship within the Fellowship symbolized a breaking of old hostilities between their races, hinting at the possibility of greater unity in the future. The wisdom of Elrond and Galadriel guided the quest, while their havens offered sanctuary and resources that made the journey possible. Ultimately, the Free People's strength lay in their ability to resist Sauron's most insidious weapon: fear. Sauron ruled through terror and domination, yet the bravery of individuals like Aragorn, who led the armies of the West to the Black Gate, showed that courage could challenge even the greatest of evils. This final stand at the Black Gate, while a diversion to give Frodo time, was a moment of profound defiance, a refusal to surrender to despair. Tolkien's portrayal of the Free People's efforts emphasizes a recurring theme. Victory is not achieved through power alone, but through unity, perseverance, and the willingness to make sacrifices for a greater good. Sauron's downfall was as much a triumph of these virtues as it was the result of the destruction of the One Ring. It was a reminder that even in the darkest times, the combined efforts of many can bring about light. Even after his physical form was obliterated and his armies scattered, Sauron's presence lingered in Middle-earth as a shadow, a reminder of the immense darkness that had once threatened to engulf the world. The destruction of the One Ring didn't entirely erase him. It diminished him to a powerless spirit of malice, unable to act, but fully aware of his failure. This lingering presence served as the final echo of Sauron's once great power. Tolkien describes this state as a form of imprisonment, where Sauron's spirit remained bound to Middle-earth, unable to exert influence or even take shape. Unlike Morgoth, who was cast into the void, Sauron was condemned to witness the world he had sought to dominate slowly heal and flourish in his absence. This wasn't just a punishment. It was the ultimate irony for a being who had poured his essence into controlling others. To exist without power or form was a torment far worse than death. This shadow of Sauron, though powerless, was not forgotten by the peoples of Middle-earth. The scars he left behind, both physical and emotional, were enduring reminders of his tyranny. Mordor remained a wasteland for years, its desolation a testament to the price of his reign. The free peoples, while victorious, carried the weight of their losses and the memory of the sacrifices that had been made to ensure his defeat. In a broader sense, Sauron's final state highlights Tolkien's view of evil as a self-defeating force. By tying his existence so closely to the One Ring, Sauron sealed his own fate. His arrogance and belief in his own invincibility blinded him to the possibility of failure. When the ring was destroyed, it didn't just strip him of his power, it revealed the fragility of his entire existence. In the end, his inability to see beyond his own ambition led to his complete unmaking. Sauron's shadow serves as a cautionary tale within Tolkien's legendarium. It's a reminder that the pursuit of domination and the rejection of creation's natural order come at a steep price. While his spirit may linger, it is impotent and irrelevant, a faint whisper of the malice that once threatened Middle-earth. For the free peoples, his defeat was not just a victory, it was liberation from the fear that had gripped them for so long. In Tolkien's world, corruption is not merely a moral failing, but a cosmic choice that binds the corrupt to its consequences. Sauron's fate after the destruction of the One Ring exemplifies this concept. By choosing domination over service, he severed himself from the possibility of redemption and condemned himself to an eternity of impotence and awareness. His ambition to reshape Middle-earth in his image left him trapped within it, powerless and tormented. Sauron's downfall was deeply tied to his decision to invest so much of his essence into the One Ring. It was a gamble born of hubris, the belief that his control over the ring would be unchallenged. But by doing so, he made himself vulnerable to its destruction. Tolkien often described this act as the ultimate folly of evil. Tying one's power to a single object or outcome inherently creates the means for ruin. The ring's destruction didn't just rob Sauron of his strength, it exposed the emptiness at the core of his ambition. Unlike Morgoth, who was cast into the void as punishment, Sauron's consequence was uniquely tied to Middle-earth. His spirit, diminished to the point of vanishing, remained bound to the world he had sought to dominate. This tethering wasn't just a reminder of his failure, it was a reflection of his corrupted nature. As Tolkien describes in the Silmarillion, fallen beings like Sauron are left goring upon themselves, consumed by the malice that once drove them. His existence became a shadow of torment, a reflection of the choices that led to his ruin. The impact of Sauron's corruption extended beyond himself. The lands he ruled over bore the marks of his tyranny long after his fall. Mordor, once fertile and green, was a wasteland of ash and ruin. The peoples of Middle-earth, though victorious, carried scars both physical and emotional from the wars he waged. Yet it is in the recovery and resilience of Middle-earth that Tolkien shows the ultimate consequence of Sauron's corruption. While evil may cause immense harm, it cannot prevail against the enduring power of good. Sauron's story serves as a profound warning against the pursuit of unchecked power. His fall wasn't simply the result of external forces, it was the natural outcome of his own decisions. Tolkien emphasizes this in his letters, explaining that Sauron's punishment was not imposed upon him, but was the inevitable result of his own nature. By choosing to dominate rather than create, Sauron ensured that his legacy would be one of destruction and futility. Sauron's story, like that of his master Morgoth, illustrates a recurring cycle of darkness and ruin in Tolkien's legendarium. Both sought to reshape the world through domination and corruption, but their paths ultimately led them to the same fate: isolation, impotence, and irrelevance. Their stories are not merely tales of defeat, but of self-destruction, where ambition becomes the root of their undoing. Morgoth, the original Dark Lord, was the most powerful of the Valar, yet his thirst for control corrupted his purpose. His rebellion against the other Valar and his attempts to unmake the beauty of Ardor left him as a formless spirit banished to the void beyond time and space. He became a cautionary tale of the ultimate consequences of rejecting creation's balance. Sauron, as Morgoth's lieutenant, watched his master's fall, but failed to heed the warning it provided. Instead of learning from Morgoth's mistakes, Sauron repeated them. After Morgoth's banishment, Sauron sought to fill the void left by his master's absence, but his methods, while more subtle, mirrored Morgoth's in their intent. Sauron sought to dominate Middle-earth through manipulation and control, creating the One Ring as a tool of absolute power. This act of arrogance tied him irrevocably to the ring, echoing Morgoth's reliance on the Silmarils as symbols of his dominion. Tolkien highlights this cyclical nature of corruption in the Silmarillion and the Lord of the Rings. Both Morgoth and Sauron desired to shape the world according to their will, but in doing so, they became victims of their own ambitions. Morgoth's thirst for power led to his exile, while Sauron's binding of his essence to the ring ensured his collapse when it was destroyed. Their stories are reminders that the pursuit of power for its own sake is inherently self-defeating. The parallels between their fates also emphasized Tolkien's view that evil is not a creative force. Morgoth and Sauron sought to build empires, but their creations were destructive, fueled by fear and control. When their power faltered, their dominions collapsed, leaving only ruin behind. Sauron's fall mirrored Morgoth not only in its outcome, but in the emptiness it revealed. Both sought to dominate, but in the end, they were left as shadows of what they once were. This cycle of darkness serves as a stark warning in Tolkien's works. It underscores the futility of ambition rooted in domination, and the inevitable consequences of rejecting harmony. While Morgoth's and Sauron's actions caused immense suffering, their defeats allowed Middle-earth to heal and grow. The cycle ends not with their victories, but with their losses. And it is in those losses that the world finds the opportunity for renewal. Sauron's lingering shadow after his defeat serves as more than just a haunting memory. It stands as a powerful warning woven into the fabric of Middle-earth. His fate is a reminder of the consequences of unchecked ambition and the dangers of abandoning creation's natural balance. While he no longer held physical form or influence, his story persisted as a testament to the futility of evil and the resilience of those who resisted it. The free peoples of Middle-earth bore the scars of Sauron's tyranny, but they also carried the lessons learned from his downfall. In the wake of his defeat, the rulers of Gondor and the leaders of the other free peoples worked to rebuild their lands, striving to create a future free from the shadow of domination. Aragorn's coronation as King Elessar marked not just the end of Sauron's reign, but the beginning of a new age of cooperation and renewal, where the mistakes of the past would guide the choices of the future.